In October 2018, I was very ill. I didn't realize how ill I was, otherwise I'd have probably had a heart attack and died. I was struggling with sepsis, and sepsis had got in through my right foot. And then I'm having surgery on my foot, and I realized that they were amputating my right foot, or most of my right foot. And they took a look at it and they said, the sepsis is still going. We're going to have to cut your right leg off. And I said, okay. And I said, when's that? And they said, at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, we have to do it soon, because if it goes above the knee, that's it. It's game over, obviously. And they took my blood and they tested my blood sugar and my blood pressures. And they took my temperature, etc., and asked me if I was okay. And I said, yeah, I'm fine. And the nurse went away, and it was very quiet in there at that time in the morning. And I had a pain in my chest. I'd struggled with the operation because I was on so many antibiotics that my heart had started to give out on the operating table. So they brought me back. And I had this pain in my chest. I thought, well, I don't like to make a fuss or anything, the poor nurse is on night duty. But it got so bad, I went to reach for the buzzer at the side of my bed. And the next thing I know, I must have fallen backwards because everything went black. The next thing that's happening is I'm traveling at warp 9 down a tunnel, feet first. The tunnel is dark. There's a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's light enough that I can see bits of the tunnel kind of flashing by. And I'm thinking, okay, this is unusual, not your average Thursday. And I came out of the tunnel, and I found myself in a beautiful room. I found myself in a room that was white beyond white. It was almost a glimmering, shimmering, shining white. It felt as if it was almost a living thing. The floors were glowing, the walls, the ceiling. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm not quite taking everything. I'm just dealing with all these stimuli as they happen. And then in front of me and to my right, I see a group of people. And at the front of the group of people is my mother, who'd been dead at that stage for 9 years, and my stepfather, Dennis, who had been dead for 13 years. And my mother, at the end of her life, was physically immobile, couldn't speak, was in a terrible state, had dementia, had no cognitive abilities whatsoever, and was confined to a bed. And she ran towards me like a 10-year-old. She skipped towards me, and she looked about 40 years younger. And Dennis followed on dutifully, as he always did. And my mother just began talking to me in her usual animated way, in her lovely West Country accent, and she spoke like a Gatling gun. And she was just telling me about spirit and heaven. And she was going, oh, so you won't believe, oh, the colors, the animals, the plants, the trees, the sky. Oh, this, and she was just, I'm still in a state of what the blinking heck is going on here. Because again, I'm reacting to the stimuli as they happen, but I'm also finding that I can juggle about 20 thoughts in my head at once. I become extremely cognitive, and I'm very aware, and I'm trying to take everything in. And she's telling me about heaven, the spirit world. Oh, you just see, oh, it's so, you won't believe it. And poor Dennis is trying to get a word in edgeways at the back, and he, as usual, he can't. And she's just so excitable. And I'm taking this in, and slowly it begins to dawn on me that where I am and what is going on. And at the same time as I do that, I begin to have a very heavy internal dialogue with myself. And I guess it would be like a kind of mini life review, because I knew that there was a very faint door in the wall in front of me. And somebody inside me told me if I went through that door, that's it. I'm not coming back through. That's game over. And I'm looking at the door and I'm hearing my mother talking. I kind of close her out for a bit, and I begin to have this internal dialogue, which basically consists of, am I ready to go, and have I done enough with my life? And I scan back through my life, and I realize, okay, I've been married for 35 years, I've raised a family, I've had good jobs, I've done this, I've done that. And then I hit my creative side, which is very strong, but I've never had any confidence in myself to do it. So I compose music, I write books, I've worked as a writer, but I've never produced anything under my own name because I've always felt, well, who's going to read that? You know, I'm no Charles Dickens, am I? I've composed music which has never been published 30 odd years ago because, again, who's going to listen to that? You know, I'm not exactly Beethoven, am I? And I've had this mentality and this self-destructive element probably for the last 35 years. And all this was kind of replaying to me all the times that I could have done that in 1998. Why didn't I do that in 1994? Why didn't I do that in 2003? And I'm getting really kind of emotional because I'm realizing that creatively, my life has been a big failure. I've not achieved anything of what I wanted to do. And I can hear my mother's voice still going on in the background, bless her. And I'm completely shutting her out. And I'm thinking, no, this isn't right. And she realizes, and she says, oh, as usual, you're not listening to me. And she said, well, if you're not going to listen to me, listen to him. And I'm thinking, who? I looked at Dennis, no, she didn't mean him. And out of the door, kind of floated this wonderful man. Now, I'm not a religious person. I'm not a Christian. I'm fascinated by religion, but I don't adhere to any one faith. But if I had been a Christian, I would have said that that was Jesus of Nazareth or Jesus Christ, because he did look like him, although I would say he was more European in his face. But he came towards me, and by this time, I'm really giving myself, you know, a really hard time, but I'm being brutally honest. And he walked towards me, and as he got close to me, I began to calm down. And he looked at me and he said, why are you here? And I thought, I don't know, because I was kind of hoping that he would tell me. And I said, well, and then I just let it all out on him. And I said, well, you know, I haven't achieved anything. I haven't done anything, blah, 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 blah. And I was getting really emotional. And he put his hand on my arm, and immediately I calmed down. And every time that I would say something, he would just knock it back to me like in a tennis match. And I would say, blah, 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 blah. And he just said, what do you want to do, Kevin? What do you want to do? And I thought, oh, well, I'd like to do this, and I'd like to do that, and I'd like to finish that project I started in 1987, and I'd like to do this, and I'd like to build that, and blah, blah, blah. And he said, there you go. Now tell me again, what do you want to do? And I said, I want to create things. I want to make things. And I started to get, every time I got animated, he would just calm his voice. The weird thing is also, John, my mother had spoke to me with her mouth. With this gentleman, it was purely telepathic. No movement of the mouth at all. I could hear his voice in my mind. Very, very calming, very deep, very resonant. I felt that I knew him. So my assumption 6 years later is that he was some kind of spirit guide. He was certainly a teacher and certainly a very wise, patient and empathic soul, way beyond anything I've ever felt or imagined in my life. And he just said to me again, what do you want to do, Kevin? And I said, I want to write, I want to do this, and I want to do that, and I want to help people, and I want to blah, blah, blah. And he said, well, okay, then do it. And he looked into my eyes, and the next thing I'm awake in my hospital bed, and I've got a tear running down my cheek. And I think about 15 minutes had passed. And I thought, wow. But the weird thing is, when I was in my hospital bed, I came back and I have this ring around my middle, like a donut, and I'm in the hole in the center. And I've got this energy around me, and it feels phenomenal. It wasn't there, certainly wasn't there before I passed out on the bed. I've got this wonderful ring of energy. I won't call it light, I couldn't see it, but I could feel it. And it felt like just unconditional love. And this energy just completely resonated around my middle. And a voice in my head just said, it's going to be okay. It's going to be fine. And I spent the next 3.5 hours kind of staring into space, reliving everything, saying goodbye to my right leg and all the good times that we'd had. Because I knew at 9 o'clock, that was it. I was going to be one leg short. And I was out of hospital just over a month. I still have a few issues with it, with my foot, but essentially, I didn't need plastic surgery. I didn't die, and they can't. It doesn't say officially on my medical notice, Mr. Milsom is very hard to kill, which I'm going to put on my CV, on my resume, because they said we've no idea why that happened. They did say that my positive mentality probably would cover at least half of it, because they said to me, you can lose your leg or you can die. And I said, well, that's no problem. I'll have a robot leg. And they said, and they thought I was still sort of like going a bit crazy with the sepsis. And I said, no. I said, to me, it's common sense. Who wants to die? I can live with a robot leg. Because I can still write, I can still do my things, I can still compose music, I still got my brain. So to me, it would have just been, okay, it just makes me a little bit more interesting. So I had no problem with losing the leg whatsoever. But at the end of the day, something weird happened that day. And when I came back after the near-death experience, everything felt different. Everything felt full of light and hope. And ever since then, I've really tried to change my mentality and become a stronger, bolder, braver person. And so far, it's going really, really well. And I'm just trying to help people as much as I can. I've studied for a load of things. I now teach spirituality. I teach meditation. I do it online and offline. And we're just helping people in the local community. I'm writing. I plan to be composing again this year. I'm 95% through my first book. Everything's going well. Everything feels different. It feels lighter. And I think I just come back, like so many people who've had the near-death experiences, I've come back a changed person. I'm not as meek and mild as I was maybe. I don't interrogate myself so much. I just go for it. I just really go for it now, because I realized that back then I could have been a hospital statistic. I could have died very easily. And I know had I gone through the door, I would have died. My life just, I hadn't achieved what I wanted to achieve creatively. And so I'm just going to spend the rest of my days completely filling in all of those blanks and hitting all of those goals. And hopefully I can live to 178 and I might get half of them done. But but I am a completely changed person, John. A completely changed person.